Hello class, today we're going to be talking about linear perspective. When we create two-dimensional art, our work is technically flat, and so we do not have a sense of the third dimension. However, we can imply a sense of depth by using a few simple tools. Before the Renaissance, artists were limited to just what they knew, which, there were no colleges or anything like that. So it was very, very minimal. All that they realized is that whenever things overlap in images, that it appears to be in front of one another. When things get smaller, what we call diminishing size, we read those things as being further away. And when things are closer to the bottom of a composition, we read those things as being closer to us. And if they're higher up in the composition, we read those as being further away. I like to call this intuitive perspective because it's just kind of doing what you know and what's kind of simple. However, these are not the most exciting ways to create a sense of depth, and you can see these different techniques here, each on their own and then kind of combined together. Now here's a piece from the 13th century, and you can see that the artist tried to create a little bit of depth in the work with the overlapping of the two persimmons on the right, and then having one persimmon lower in terms of the vertical placement, reading as being closer to us. But I don't think anybody's jaw is dropping open because they're blown away by the sense of depth. So things were pretty limited for a while in trying to create a sense of what we call perspective or depth. And perspective wasn't a term really at that point. It didn't come about until the Renaissance. Here is a beautiful painting by Robert Campin, and the piece was called the Marode Altarpiece. And clearly you can see the use of color, value, texture, even the human anatomy is fairly accurate. And if you look at the dates, this is in the 1400s. So this is what we would have called the early Renaissance. And so this is before some of the famous artists of the Renaissance, like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello that you've heard of before. So this would have been someone that they would have seen this artist's work and been inspired by it. So Robert Campin was a really well-known artist, and he was known because he was able to make things look so lifelike and real. And I think he did achieve that in this, what we call a triptych, which means it's three pieces that work together as one. Often these triptychs, or a diptych, which would be two pieces working together as one, or multiple panels working together in what we call a polytych, they would have been placed on a altar in a church or in someone's home for like a small area of devotion or worship. And this was before any electricity or television or anything like that. So having these images that folded open, kind of like a book, in their churches or their homes, would have been something inspiring to look at. And so they often depicted different biblical stories that had taken place in their faith. So here we can see the Virgin Mary and the Archangel Gabriel in the center panel. And the people of this time would have recognized those characters from their faith just because they had grown up hearing those stories. And then on the right hand side in the right panel, we see Joseph, which he was known as to be a carpenter, and he married Mary and raised Jesus as his child, even though he was not, the father. And people of this time would have recognized that because you can see Joseph in his carpentry shed working on his creations. Now, if you look at all of these people in this painting, they don't look like they're from the biblical times. They look like they're from the Renaissance. And that's part of what made Robert Campion's work really powerful, is that he made the biblical characters look like contemporary Renaissance people. And you may wonder, well, why would he do that? Well, the same reason that people remake music today, they remake movies, they remake television shows, is because issuing it into society makes a new generation of people connect with it more. And so that's what he was doing here. In the biblical story, Mary was chosen by God because of her faith. And so here we see Mary, just this ordinary woman who had a strong faith, being selected by God to be visited by this angel that told her that she's going to have God's baby. You can imagine that would probably be a pretty shocking revelation to be, told. And so the angels come in to tell her that that's going to happen. And so people of that time, if they were to look at this painting, maybe, and the people look like them, obviously, then maybe they would think, well, maybe if I live, a faithful life, then I'll be chosen for something, great as well. So same technique that we use today in our media was used back then through painting in the Renaissance. You may be wondering, well, who are these people on the left hand side that are kneeling and looking into the door watching this event happen? Well, funny story, they actually are the people that commission the painting. And so, just like today, if you commission a work of art or you purchase a bunch of books for a library or you pay money to have a building built, there usually will be some type of a plaque or maybe a stamp in the book saying, this was made possible by these donors. Well, back then, if you donated money to have artwork made, then they would put you in the artwork, kind of showing that your faith is what allowed this to happen. And then, way in the background, you can see a man standing. That is believed to be the artist. And so he threw a little selfie in there, just like we often do today. So it's kind of interesting how not much has changed. Now, I'm getting more into the art history just because I wanted you to know a little more about this. But one of the things I wanted to point out is even though this is a really beautiful triptych painting, the perspective is really off. In some places, it looks really good, like we can see in the ceiling in the middle part and maybe the steps to the left. But if we look at the center panel in the at the table, especially, and the bench that Mary is sitting next to, it looks really off. Also, if we look at the work table that Joseph is sitting at, it almost looks like a slide, kind of like the table that Mary's sitting next to. And that's because they had not perfected what we call linear perspective. And so he was just doing his best and trying to get a sense of depth. But you can clearly see it doesn't look like it's in real space. So, around the time of the High Renaissance, there was a lot of things happening. The word Renaissance actually means rebirth, and it wasn't just a rebirth in art, it was a rebirth in music, in literature, and just everyday life. People actually started caring about other things than just what had been done before. And during that time period, there was a movement called humanism where people even started thinking outside of these social classes, realizing that maybe everybody has potential if they're given a chance or an opportunity. And so it was a really exciting time to be living. They also realized that whenever people learn about multiple things, they bring more to their own field. And so during that time period, artists started learning about math and science and all of these other things, and they became curious about other aspects of life and education. And again, this was still before really any books were readily available. Most artists would just look at each other's work and learn from emulation or looking at each other's work and kind of mastering their work and then trying to find a way to create their own and make their own unique path in the art world. Also, artists had never been written down before. up until this point, except for a couple of ancient cultures. They had really never been recorded. And so during this time period, a writer named Vasari actually said, you know what, some of these artists are doing some really cool stuff. Maybe we should write their names down and give them credit for this moment in history. And so he did. He wrote the first art history book. And in that book, he wrote about a lot of these Renaissance artists that we celebrate still today. So, again, it was a very exciting time. And as artists began learning about math and science and other things, then they realized that depicting three dimensional space was really not that challenging, that it was a simple process, and that once they figured out how to do it, it made recreating realistic imagery and depth pretty simple. And that's how it all came about. And I want you to realize this was all before electricity or any of the modern technology that we have today. So you can do this. Okay, they were able to figure it out without iPhones and computers and all the things that we have today. So whenever they discovered this way to draw, they called it linear perspective. And basically, that just means creating a sense of three-dimensional space in a two-dimensional format. What they realized and what they had not been doing correctly is that they did realize things get smaller, or they appear to get smaller as they go further away from us. But they were not realizing that most objects in a view, they go to one point. And so they had been drawing sometimes things to several different points, and not really knowing how to handle certain environments that they were in. And so once they discovered that if you're looking at things from a frontal view, everything in your view appears to go to one point in the distance, and we call that the vanishing point. Now, where that vanishing point ends up is what we call the horizon line. And that's, if you're outdoors, that would be where the earth and the sky meet. And you may have noticed this before if you're standing outside, maybe on a straight road, and you are looking in the distance. Watch out for traffic. But if you stand and look in the distance, you'll see it appears to go to one point. Or if you're in a long hallway and you stare down the hallway, it's going to appear to go to one point. And so that's what we call the vanishing point. And like I said, that will be with the horizon line. It usually will always be on the horizon line. Now, the vantage point, that's another term that you hear quite a bit. That's your viewpoint, or the artist's viewpoint. So if you're lower to the ground, maybe let's say laying down, and you're looking into the distance, you're going to be at a lower vantage point because you're going to be slightly looking up. If you're eye level with the horizon line, maybe standing, you're going to be at an eye level vantage point. And let's say you're on top of a building or a roof or a hill and you're looking down, you're going to be at a high vantage point. Now, several types of perspective were mastered and are taught today in classes. I'm only going to require that you understand and can prove that you understand 1-point and 2-point perspective. I did include some others in this presentation just for your own curiosity and for the Drawing 2 students if they wanted to challenge themselves to do more, okay? But if this is all new to you and it's scary, then by all means just try to master the 1-point and 2-point and you'll be fine, okay? So 1-point perspective, as I said, that's basically what people started to do in the Renaissance. They would draw things from a frontal view, and then everything that you see will be drawn to that one vanishing point. Now, during the Renaissance, they often put that vanishing point in the center of the composition and in the center of the paper. And that's not how it always is. We're not always standing eye level with the vanishing point, and everything's not always, centered in our view. But they were learning. So eventually, over time, you'll see in other periods, they started to move the vanishing point from a lower vantage point or a higher vantage point and to one side of a room or another. So it created a little bit more energy in the composition. So this is one point perspective, and you can see these rectangles were started, and then they were drawn to the one vanishing point on all four sides, and then a parallel line was drawn to find the backside, and then eventually you would erase those orthogonal lines, which are the ones going back to the vanishing point. And I will be doing a tutorial for you guys, so a demonstration. So don't worry, I will show you how to do this, and I've included some links in this PowerPoint as well, so that you may visit those sites and learn more about it if you're not understanding. So here's a perfect example of one point perspective. But look at the date of this, 1508, and this was painted by Raphael. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know when I was in school, I sometimes had to take a class more than one time to fully understand things and to master it. And I know the same thing as a teacher. I'll do a demo, I'll give you guys a lecture, I'll do the assignment along with you, and some of you it takes you a couple of attempts before you can really master it. Look at this, Raphael, in the same time period that perspective was discovered and mastered, he painted this mural with perfect one point perspective. It's amazing how they did that without technology, without college, without textbooks, all of those things. I have no idea. But he was tasked to paint this four murals in the Pope's library, and they were supposed to represent the four branches of knowledge. And at the time, philosophy was one of those branches of knowledge. And so here we see Plato and Aristotle in the center, and Plato's motioning towards the heavens because his ideas were based upon heavenly forms, and Aristotle's motioning towards the ground because his ideas were based upon earthly forms. And then all around them are all of these other great thinkers from ancient times and other time periods that were important, and people during the Renaissance would have recognized most of these characters. Now, the the very fascinating part about this was a fresco painting, which means that it was painted on the wall, and he could only do small sections at a time, where you put down limestone plaster and then you paint with water and pigment while it's wet. So you can only do little small sections at a time because the plaster and the pigment and water have to dry together to make a permanent bond. So how he created all this precision, I have no idea. But what's really cool about it is you can follow the lines of the painted architecture that are in perfect one point perspective, and it will lead you to a vanishing point that's right between Plato and Aristotle. And so he also used the perspective to create a focal point, having directional lines that lead you to a focal point of those two central characters. Now, Raphael, you may not have seen as much of his artwork as you have maybe artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And the reason is, one, he died when he was really young, he was in his 30s. And another reason is he was the youngest of most of those famous Renaissance artists, and they didn't really like him. I know when you hear the Ninja Turtles, and they have the same name as the master artists of the Renaissance, but they all hang out in a sewer and eat pizza together. Well, the Renaissance artists didn't really do that. The oldest was Donatello, then Leonardo da Vinci, then Michelangelo, and then Raphael was the youngest. And they were each other's competition, especially people like Michelangelo and Leonardo, who were known to do painting and sculpture and other things. And so when Raphael, this young painter, started coming about, he was a threat to these other guys that had been around for a while. And Michelangelo and Da Vinci were known to fight and to argue with each other. Leonardo da Vinci even wrote in one of his journals that sculptors were nasty and they made a bunch of noise and made a mess everywhere, where painters were elegant and they sat in their clean studios and listened to music and, sipped wine and didn't make a mess. So it's kind of funny that they kind of, fought back and forth and were shady to each other. But anyway, you can imagine, even though maybe they weren't really wanting to be best friends with Raphael, Raphael would have still really looked up to them because that's how he would have learned, is by studying those great artists that had come before him. And so, to pay tribute to them, he actually painted Plato to look like Leonardo da Vinci. And then this guy in the foreground that's leaning against the box that looks kind of stubborn, that's supposed to be Michelangelo. And then way over to the right side, you see a little profile right by the end of this arch. That is supposed to be Raphael. So there's some fun contemporary references in this, as well as the references to antiquity. Now, I've altered the image a little bit and put some lines over the painting so you could see how accurate the 1-point perspective is. And you've probably seen this image before, but maybe really never thought about the perspective, but maybe you thought, wow, that's really cool. It looks really three-dimensional. Now, this is from the Baroque era, and this is a painting also called The Last Supper. You've probably seen Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting before, but you probably haven't seen this one. If you've taken art history, you probably have. But this was the period that followed the Renaissance, called the Baroque era. And the Baroque era was known for several things. They mastered the techniques of the Renaissance artists, and then they challenged themselves to do more. And one of the things, as you could see with the previous slide, the Last Supper the School of Athens painting, it looked like it was daylight and everybody was centered, and the vanishing point was right in the middle. The same thing with the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Jesus is right in the center, and everything leads to, one point, and it looks like, like it's daylight outside. So in the Baroque era, they realized, like, why does it always have to be, bright outside, and why does the vanishing point always have to be in the center? And so they started moving the vanishing point around, and they also turned down the lights to make the artwork more moody or more emotional. And so here we can see Tintoretto's Last Supper painting, his version of it. And you can see the lights are turned down. In addition to Jesus and the disciples, you can see additional servants and cooks and help. And then you can also see, even in the around the lights, in the smoke, you can see what looks like maybe angels or spirits. And even Jesus has like this kind of halo glowing around him as he's, serving his followers. And the vanishing point, if you follow the sides of the table, it leads you up to the upper right hand corner. So the vanishing point is up in the upper right hand corner. It's still 1-point perspective, but it's it's got more energy. It makes you feel like you're looking deeper, maybe into the room. So just some new ways of doing this, and I wanted you to see this because a lot of times students always want to put their vanishing point right in the middle of the paper, and for your beginning assignments, that's helpful, definitely. But as you get into some of the more creative options that we're going to do, you may experiment with moving the vanishing point around a little bit. Now, these are teacher-approved videos from YouTube that just show some fun little tricks about 1-point perspective. So if you aren't understanding it after our talk and my demo and this lecture, then I would come back and watch some of these videos. So the second type of perspective we're going to talk about is 2-point perspective. And just like 1-point perspective had one vanishing point, 2-point perspective means there's going to be two vanishing points. Now, I also mentioned that with 1-point perspective, that means we're looking at the front of a surface. We don't always stand at the front of surfaces, do we? So what happens if we stand at a corner? Well, that's when we have to draw in 2-point perspective. So if you think about standing in like a corner of a room, or at a corner of a table, it's going to go off in two different directions instead of one. And so that's why you would use two-point perspective. So if you're standing at a corner of a building or a box or a table, you have two sides going off into the distance. So how you start this is you draw your horizon line, and then you draw your two vanishing points. Sometimes they will be off the paper, and I'll show you how to do that in the demo. And then instead of starting with a shape, you actually start with a segment of a line for the edge or corner. And then from that corner of that edge, you're going to draw to both vanishing points. And then to find the back corner, you're going to draw from the front sides to the opposite vanishing point. And where those intersect, that will create your back corner or edge. And if you're like, what is he talking about? Don't worry. Like I said, I will do a demo, and you'll understand eventually. Now, Vincent van Gogh, we talked about before. He had quite a bit of challenges in his life, and he was known for his really expressive use of color and his really thick impasto texture, where he was applying the paint very generously with a palette knife, and that made his work look a little bit more abstract. And in some cases, that can make your work look more childlike if you didn't have a strong foundation of perspective or space. And he fortunately understood that, and we can see that in this painting he did of his yellow house that he lived in at one point in his life. And if you follow the right side of this house and go towards, you'll find a vanishing point about where you see the underpass of this bridge is. And then on the left side, if you follow the side, you'll see the vanishing point would be off the left side of the paper. And so one of the things, if you put your vanishing points both on the paper, that means that's the maximum vision that you have is between those two dots. And we see in a circle. And so anything outside of those dots, you couldn't see in that area. So that's why you may at one point want to put one or maybe both of your vanishing points off your paper, because it will allow you to draw larger, and you won't have these areas that seem kind of strange in your composition. And again, I'll show you how to do that. This is a pretty complex watercolor, but so here are some teacher-approved two-point perspective videos. Again, I will do a demo, but if you need more help, I would encourage you to watch these videos. Be careful with just going straight to YouTube, because there are some bad demonstrations on YouTube, and I have no control over that. So these three videos are teacher approved. So just to let you know, I've seen videos of people using like rubber bands and things like that. You could lose an eye doing that if that rubber band pops. So be careful. Also, it's not very accurate. I've tried it and it doesn't work really like they show you in the video. So just use a ruler or a straight edge. You don't have to measure anything. So all you need is just something that's straight. So you could use, the side of a folder, or, a yardstick, whatever it is that you have at home. Now, if you're already like, I can't handle this, I don't need any more, then just cover your ears, for this part, and move on. But those of you in drawing too, or those of you that have an interest in architecture and these more type of technical drawings, especially if you're going into game design and animation, like, you're going to need to understand these concepts. Even though they have programs that do this for you, the electricity may go out and you have to know how to do this on your own. So there is a three-point perspective, and three-point perspective has to do with the height as well as the depth going back into space, but also the depth going up or down. And so we usually call three-point perspective bird's eye views or worm's eye views, because you're either looking up or you're looking down in addition to the sides. Okay? So think about if you were in, let's say, downtown Dallas, and you were visiting, don't go right now, but you were visiting, let's say, El Centro. And right across the street from El Centro is the Bank of America building. A lot of people call it the Green Giant because it's the one that's green and it's really tall. I think it's one of the tallest buildings downtown. If you were to stand at the side of that building at a corner and you were to look directly at that corner, but then also slightly look up, it's going to appear to go to a point in the sky as well as to 2 points on either side. So that's what we would call 3 point perspective. If you were to take an elevator to the top and you were to stand at a corner on the roof, which I don't know why anybody would want to do that unless they're Batman. You could look down and you would see that it appears to go to 1 point towards the ground, and that's what we call the bird's eye view. And so you'll see in these two images diagrams of images that were created that way. So on the left, you see a piece by MC Escher showing the bird's eye view, looking kind of like you're flying over it. And basically, you would do this the same way as you do 2 point perspective, but then you would draw a vanishing point. If it's bird's eye view, you would draw a vanishing point underneath. And if you're doing the worm's eye view, like the image on the right, you would draw the 2 points, and then you would also draw one above that everything, all the sides, the vertical sides would be drawn to. Here's another diagram just showing you how to do that. This was a drawing that was in progress, and you can see how everything lines up. So drawing two students, if you want to do this instead of the 2 point perspective assignments, you could do 3 point instead. Now, again, if this is too much, there's also a 5 point perspective, and that's where you draw to the left and right, up and down, and into the distance, and it gives you a fisheye kind of view. This is an example of a drawing that was done this way. It looks very organic because the lines are all curved, but it's very, scientific, and it's not very easy to do. And I had a student one semester who he really, really wanted to do this, and this is not my favorite thing to do. Perspective, if you've seen my work, I do like abstract painting. So when I was a student, I never thought I would be teaching you guys how to do this either, but I'm glad I paid attention, and I'm glad I mastered it as a student so that it's easier to show you how to do it. But I had a student, he was like, I want to do 5 point perspective, and I was like, why? How do you even know about that? Because I used to not tell students about it because it is kind of challenging, to teach people how to do this. But he did a really good job, and I'll have to see if I can find an image of his work. But it looked very similar to this one, and he finished it, and in critique, everybody was just kind of blown away. And I was like, "Are you ever going to do it again?" And he said, "Absolutely not." So it is a little challenging, but it does pay off. Like it looks really cool when you do it right. And then these next two types of perspective. I don't necessarily need to see this in your work, but I wanted you to be aware of it, because you may be doing work that, let's say, with watercolor or ink, and this might be helpful for you to make your pieces look more real. So atmospheric perspective, it has to do with depth, but it doesn't have anything to do with lines. But if you look in the distance, like I said, at a road, you'll see that the road appears to go to 1 point. But if you look around the road, the rest of the nature or whatever it is, it also changes because as things go back into space, our vision is limited, but also the air around things is not empty. It's filled with moisture, pollution, dust, all kinds of stuff. And so if you think about things being miles away that are in your vision, there's a lot of stuff in front of them. So they're not going to be really crisp and sharp, just like the things that are closer to you. So in our artwork, if we paint the sky all the same color and the grass all the same color and the trees that are in the foreground are outlined and sharp and the trees that are right on the edge of the horizon are the same way, it's going to look like a kid did it because it's going to feel very flat. So we have to realize that as things go further away from us, all that air in between that's filled with all kinds of molecules it's going to work as like a filter, and it's going to blur things as they go further away from us. And this, you'll start to see this too as you look around. So here's an example of a photograph of a mountain range, and you can clearly see the mountain that looks like the photographer's on, or they're close to, is really green and covered with trees and other plants. And then as they get further away, they just kind of blend into the sky. And that's exactly what we call atmospheric perspective. Because of the atmosphere, it filters things as they get further away and makes them less distinct and get kind of a bluish gray sort of color. So really good landscape painters will try to capture that in their work. And here we can see that in this painting. We see it in this painting as well. This one we also see that diminishing size and vertical placement. And then even the Mona Lisa, which you've all probably seen throughout your whole life, you maybe have not noticed that there's atmospheric perspective in the background. And you can see how clearly it looks like the space is going back and things are getting blurrier the further away they are from her. And you can really see, if you look at her hands, how sharp and crisp they are compared to the landscape, how soft and kind of blurred it is the further it goes away. And I'm not going to talk about the Mona Lisa because we'll be here, the rest of the day. But lots of interesting things about this painting. And if you're wondering, well, how is she up in the sky with this deep landscape behind her? Well, she's actually on a balcony, and originally the painting had two columns on either side of her, and they believe that it was cropped down at some point, possibly during the World War II when they had to hide the painting from the Nazis. Now, isometric perspective, this is not something you'll have to do in this class, but you've probably had to do it in your geometry classes. And that's where we draw objects as they are, not how we see them. And so parallel lines stay parallel, and that helps people keep things to scale whenever they're building or creating them. So this is how a lot of architects and engineers will draw things, because if they drew something in two-point perspective, and then someone else was given that, and then they were asked to build it, they may not understand that it's not to scale, and so you may end up with a building that has hallways that get shorter as they go further away from you, and that's not good. So that's why we draw an isometric perspective for technical drawings, so that things can be kept to scale. We also see this in some cultures throughout history. They believe that you shouldn't distort how things are, and so you will see some of the work like that has the parallelograms instead of the 1-point or 2-point perspective. Here's an example of that. You can see the figures and the nature look pretty accurate, but the chairs and the tables look like parallelograms, and they look kind of off because that's not how we see them, but that is how they actually are. Now, in this class, we are going to do 4 perspective assignments, and I will be creating assignment sheets for each of these with step-by-step instructions. And I have examples here, and I also will be providing links to even more examples for you to look at. Now, the first 2 are going to be drawing just boxes in 1-point and 2-point perspective. And I've had students before say, well, can I color these? Can I make them, faces, or can I make them letters? You could, but I would really encourage you, with the time that we have left in the semester, to save that creativity for some of the other assignments that you're going to have more creative input in, okay? So these 2, it's just to kind of show me that you understand it and you can do them. And then for the 3 and 4, those are the ones you can be a little bit more creative with, okay? So for the initial 1-point drawing that you're going to do, all of these boxes are not parallel to the horizon line, and yours probably will be, and that's totally fine. But this was a student who had some experience with perspective already, and so she had asked me, like, can I make them going different directions and overlapping each other all over the place? And I was like, if you want to try to figure that out, you can. So yours may not be quite as technical looking as this. But I do want you to draw, you're going to draw 9 boxes, and 3 of those boxes have to be above the horizon line, 3 have to be on the horizon line, and 3 have to be below the horizon line. Of those 9 boxes, 3 have to be solid, 3 have to be transparent, and 3 have to be hollow. Okay? And then there has to be at least 4 places that they overlap each other. All right? If you start this and you're like, whoa, I don't have this one or that one, you can draw more than 9. Okay? That's just the minimum. I want you to do this with a ruler or a straight edge and a pencil. Do not use your B pencils because those are going to be too soft and they're going to smudge everywhere. So for technical drawings like this, you're going to want to use like your H pencils, okay? A number 2 HB pencil will be fine, but if you have like your 2H or 4H or even 6H, you may want to do these because it'll be a little bit more precise. And keep your pencil sharp and keep your vanishing point small. If you make your vanishing point too big, you may be moving the ruler a little bit too much because your point's not super precise. Okay. Once you get it all done in pencil, then you can outline it with markers or pens. Okay, and then erase all of the pencil. And one question I usually get asked is, do I need to draw the vanishing point and the horizon line in the finished drawing? Yes, but only where you would see it. Okay, so if you draw a solid shape, obviously you wouldn't see the horizon line through it. Okay, and I will be doing a demo, so just hold off on that, and you'll get to see me do that. For the 2-point perspective drawing, it's going to be the same rules, but this time it's going to be in 2-point perspective. So you'll have 2 vanishing points, and I would suggest leaving on your paper for this beginning assignment. So same rules, 3 above the horizon line, 3 on the horizon line, and then 3 below the horizon line. 3 should be solid, 3 should be transparent, and 3 should be hollow. And there should be at least 4 places that they overlap. And I know students sometimes are like, "Ugh, I don't like perspective," and I feel you. It's not my favorite thing either. But I've had several students go to UTA, UNT, the Kansas City Art Institute, and when they get there, this is something that they're most impressed with and that they expect to see from the students is an understanding of perspective. I even had one student at UNT, I think, out of his portfolio of I'm sorry, those are my dogs. But in his portfolio, he had 7 of his 9 pieces were from drawing one, and the ones that were the favorite of the committee were his perspective drawings from drawing one at North Lake. So you never know; like these could really help you out, even though it may not be the most fun thing to do. The third drawing you're going to do is a box city, and this does not have to be a city. It basically is just going to be a drawing as creative as you want using 2-point perspective. You can use any medium that you like. It could even be mixed media, and it needs to be a finished drawing. This is not super finished looking, this one here, but I thought the idea was really creative. So you want this to look like a finished piece of art that just has 2-point perspective in it, okay? So anything you want to draw, as long as there's 2-point perspective and it's original, all right? So this student was wanting to draw a chess game using geometric shapes. And so you can see his drawing. I just wish he had used like paint or markers or, something that made it look a little bit more finished, maybe a little bit more range of value. This student created a literal body shop, and you can see that was pretty creative, and the 2-point perspective is actually in the shelves in the store. I do wish they would have used a marker or pen or add some color, maybe some watercolor or something to make it look a little bit more finished, but I thought that it was at least a creative idea. This one's pretty basic, and you can even see their orthogonals, the lines and the vanishing point still. But it was, it was done well. I mean, it was accurate. But again, maybe it could be a little bit more creative. This one, the student was like, "Can I put birds on it?" I'm like, "You can do whatever you want as long as it's 2-point perspective." So you can see it's got ink and different things on it. This student, he wanted to design his own shopping mall because he said when he was a kid, he wanted to own his own mall someday. And so this was his chance to make that happen. And Smalley was his last name, so that's why it says it on the mall. But I thought he did a really good job. I think he used colored pencils for it. This student said, "Can I draw like Gotham City?" And I was like, "Sure." And she toned the paper and did the 2-point perspective. I think she could have pushed the range of values a little bit more, but I thought it was pretty creative still. Now, these are not student works, but I wanted you to see that with good art, you don't really notice the perspective, you're just amazed by it. And so, this is a watercolor artist that uses pen and like permanent ink and then watercolor over the perspective drawings. And they look a little unfinished or like they're washed away. And I just think they're really beautiful. So again, try not to think of this as I need to do a technical drawing, so try to think of it as I'm going to make a piece of art that just has perspective in it, okay? And I think that will help you with it. This is just another one. Now, this student wanted to have kind of like a post-impressionist Van Gogh kind of piece with oil pastels, and um, I thought she did a pretty good job with the perspective, but there's one problem with this is it's 1-point perspective instead of 2-point perspective. So for the box city assignment, I do want it to be 2-point perspective, okay? And this student designed like her own dream house and 2-point perspective. And the perspective looks right, but I think the bushes and the trees could have used a little bit more care as well as maybe the negative space. This student was like, "Can I do my name in 2-point perspective?" And they did, and I thought that they did a really good job with the perspective. But they used pastels, and you guys know after doing all the color exercises, are pastels something that most people are really precise with when they first start using them? Not really. So it felt a little messy. So again, think about what material would be the best materials to use. And also remember the negative space is part of the composition as well as the positive shapes. Here we can see this was a pretty simple one, but I thought that it was really clean and well done and looked like plans for some, futuristic city. This one, I love the creativity of it, and I thought that they did a beautiful job with everything. However, it was 1-point perspective instead of 2-point perspective. So again, make sure that you're following the instructions, to get full credit for it, because all 4 of these drawings will be part of your final portfolio. Okay. This student did a great job. When she described it to me, she was like, "Can I do fish tanks on a spaceship?" And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but as long as there's 2-point perspective and it looks awesome, go for it." So this is what I guess she was talking about. It looks like you're in some brightly lit science lab on some spaceship or something, but I thought she did a really good job with the assignment. This student, I think I showed y'all his self-portrait and maybe those ink blot birds that he created. And I wanted you to see the frame piece here, the matted piece. That is his box city. And it's one of the best I think I've had students do that look like an original piece of art. It's like this surrealistic, apocalyptic looking Mad Max landscape with this little figure down in the bottom and then these kind of pillars that are just going up and some birds in the sky. But it was so simple yet so beautiful. And I don't think anybody would look at it and think of it as an assignment. So again, try not to think of this so much as an assignment, but more as I'm making a piece of art that has perspective in it. Here, this student just did a 2-point perspective drawing of their bedroom. And I thought, I mean, even though it's just marker, I just thought it was really well done. And I thought I really liked it. So again, it's up to you what medium you want. I just want it to look finished and I want it to look accurate. This student did a really good job drawing the inside of their home with even art on the wall. Now, drawing an inside corner is a little trickier, but I will provide information for how to do that if you're curious. This student started drawing this really cool monster city, but she ran out of time and didn't have time to do the negative space. So again, make sure that you use this free time to work on these. Don't wait till the last minute because this is a little more technical and it may, take you more time. And then the last drawing that you're going to do is a drawing of an actual space using 1-point perspective. Okay, so for this assignment, I want you to take a photograph standing looking into the distance in 1-point perspective of some building of some kind. And I know, travel and things like that may be limited right now. So you may have a photo you've taken before, or it could be in your home, or it could be maybe an outdoor sidewalk or something. But it just needs to be a finished drawing of a real space in 1-point perspective. Okay. When I first started teaching, it was back in 2006. And so a lot of people didn't have smartphones back then. We didn't have a lot of the technology we have. So when I did this exercise or these drawings in class, the students would actually have to go down the hallways with their drawing board and their ruler and a protractor to find the angles of the hallways and all that stuff. And then I would literally have to walk the halls trying to find them and help them draw the areas that they were in. And so now I'm going to be showing you a technique that makes this a lot more simple. So stay tuned for that. And it won't be this hard. But when I was in school back in the 90s, I remember having to go outside in an advanced drawing class and draw a building at Kilgore College where I went with a pencil for like 2 weeks. Every class, I would have to go sit by myself on the sidewalk and draw this building. And my professor would come by counting every brick, every window, and every person walking by would be like, "Are you drawing?" And things like that. So the technology today, it really helps you do this. But sometimes being out in the open will be kind of nice too. But this drawing I thought was really beautiful. You can apply any color scheme that you want to this, or you could naturally try to match the colors and things that you see. This student went for kind of a more abstract look, but the drawing was really accurate. And this was all done with colored Sharpies on an 18 by 24 piece of paper. And I just thought it looked like a thermogenic, image of some kind, but it was all done with Sharpies. This student, this was at Northlake, and he used color pencil. And I remember in critique, he was like, "This hallway was so hard. I don't know why you made me draw it." And I never told him he had to draw that hallway, so I don't know why he chose the one with all those weird stairs. So it's up to you, which what you want to draw. So if this is new to you, don't make it too hard on yourself. Choose an image that's a little bit more simple to draw. This is upstairs in the G building at Northlake. It has a curved wall, which makes it a little bit tricky, but I thought they did a good job using color pencils. It's a little gestural, but I think because it's consistent, it makes it work still. This student drew the entryway into the lower level of the G building, and I really like all of the color, but they used chalk pastels, and I think the architectural part of it, like the doors and some of the edges of the halls, that they need to be a little bit sharper. And so again, think about what medium would be the best to use for this type of drawing with your skill set. This student used watercolor pencils, and those are the pencils. I'll show you how to use them, but you draw with them, and then you go back with a brush and water, and you can blend them together. So I think it made a nice effect for this type of drawing. This student drew a stairwell in the G building, and then they used like an analogous warm color scheme on it, which I thought added more to it than just doing it in black and white or the colors of the actual stairs. This one was nice. I thought um, the line drawing was good, but then they colored it in with chalk pastel. So again, think about your choice of medium and make sure that it's something that will work well. This student was a very, very good student that I had, and he went outside and he was like, I'm going to draw a sidewalk because that's technically an outdoor hallway. And he just had a ballpoint pen and a ruler and his paper and drawing board. And I was like, you need more than that, don't you? And he was like, no, I'll be back in a minute. And literally within like 30 minutes, he came back with this big 18 by 24 finished drawing just from using his ballpoint pen. And I thought he did a really good job. I did give him a hard time because if you look at the to the left side, the library, the bricks look a little off, but still, it looks really good. I thought he did a really good job with just a ballpoint pen. So if you're at home and you don't have, all your art supplies with you and you don't really see yourself being able to get out, sometimes you don't need the fanciest supplies to, make a good piece of art. Just the time and effort can make up for that. And then here we could see this was in the area of the G building, and this student added figures with masks. I don't know who those people are, but they did tell me that the pictures on the wall are crooked, that they didn't draw them incorrectly. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then this student, I wanted to show you this one. This student did use chalk pastel, but they were very precise with it. So you can use chalk pastel and do perspective drawings, but you just want to make sure that your skill level is there and that you're not setting yourself up for failure. This one I thought was very beautiful. It's a little abstract with the colors, but I really like the way that they capture the reflections and everything else. This one I thought was nice, using color just in one area to create a focal point. This one was all graphite pencil, which really blew me away because we haven't really worked large with just pencil. And the way that they created the value range, the different textures of the floor versus the walls, I just thought it was really well done. And these are all drawing 1 and 2 students, so mostly drawing 1. So you can do this, and I will be doing a demo helping you do this accurately. And then this was outdoors, looking down from between the A building and the P building. And I just thought it was a really nice drawing, incorporating the perspective and the kind of silhouettes of the figure and the landscape of Irving. So anyway, we'll be doing 4 of these assignments over the next several weeks. And like I said, I will be doing some demonstrations for you and providing more links and examples for you to help you do this. So good luck, and perspective is important.